The head turner behavior and face parallax settings are two ways that you can add some additional dimensionality to your characters. So in this tutorial, I'm going to go through both of those techniques and show you exactly how to apply them to a character like this. Now, this is a character I made in Adobe Illustrator. Pretty simple, just some basic shapes and some shadows and stuff like that. So if I add the head turner behavior to this guy, when I turn to the left and right in the webcam, he's going to turn his head as well. And I have variety over, if I want a quarter view, profile view, front view, or I can move in between them automatically and adjust the sensitivity to match whatever I'm doing in the webcam. All right, so compare that to this technique, which is using parallax to move different elements around and give the character a little bit smoother 360 movement. It's kind of a fake 3D 2.5D look for the character where its hair, the nose, the ears, all of that stuff, the shadow, all of these things are moving in unison to kind of fake a 3D effect, even though this is all just 2D Illustrator artwork. So both of these puppets are free for anyone to download. The link is in the video description below, so check that out and feel free to take them apart, learn from them, customize them, do whatever you want with them. All right, so let's start with a basic character like this. He's just got this one head-on view. He's set up normally as any character would, with a plus character group and a head and body group inside of it. And inside the head, I've got all the head contents, and inside the body, I've got the body contents. So I could do this in Photoshop or Illustrator. Today I'm in Adobe Illustrator. That's what this character was made in. And what I'm going to do first is make a new group inside my head. So I'm going to have my head selected here. I'm going to click this plus, create new layer, and let's just call this plus frontal. And I'm going to drag that plus frontal into my head so it's a layer inside the head. And then I'm going to shift select all of these other contents and drag them inside my frontal view. So now I have a front view. This is going to be the first of 5 views that I'm going to create. I'm going to create left and right quarter views and left and right profile views. Now, when you're thinking of doing head turns, you really want to think of everything as a bunch of different parts. So the more that you can have, these separate pieces that you can move around and manipulate, and the less that they're kind of linked together, the better, because then you can move all these different things at different speeds, at different scales, and skew things a little bit to work and have that sense of dimensionality individually, as opposed to trying to do everything at the same time. If everything's connected as one piece of artwork or one layer, that's going to make things a lot more complicated. So if I hide a bunch of these layers, you'll see this is kind of my base layer, right? This is everything. Everything is going to kind of work on top of this. This part is not going to move. I'm going to keep this section exactly the way it is. But then as you see, as I add these different parts to it, all of these are going to be the different pieces that move around and give us that feeling, that sensation that the head is moving from side to side. All I'm doing is I'm going to move these different parts, to the left or to the right slightly to get that sense of movement. All right, so now that I've got frontal all set, I'm going to start making another view. And the way I'm going to do that is basically duplicate my already established view that I have and then start manipulating the individual pieces as best I can. So I'm just going to hold down Option on Mac or Alt on Windows and click and drag frontal until I see a blue line that appears underneath it. And then I'll let go. And now I have a copy of my original group. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's turn the visibility off on my main frontal group and lock that. I don't need that anymore. And I'm going to change the name by double clicking this new copy and call this instead left quarter. So this is kind of an in-between. We have front, quarter, and profile views that you can go between. And quarter is kind of the middle route between those two. So inside this left quarter view, I have all my working elements, my eyebrows, my eyes, my nose. All of these should be set up the exact same and should work the exact same as being in the front view. The only difference is now I want the character to kind of turn this way, to show their left cheek a little bit more. When you're saying left quarter and left profile, it means you're seeing more of that side of the face. So I'm going to see more of the left side of the face, which means the character is actually going to turn this way to the left side of the screen or this character's right. It can get kind of confusing sometimes trying to figure out all the left-right stuff, so don't worry if you have to look at some references and figure it out. Okay, but the way that I normally start things off is I'm going to take the main face elements, and the way I'm going to select them in Illustrator is using these circles over here on the side. That's an easy way to select them instead of trying to select everything individually on the canvas. These circles help a lot, so I'm going to select the eyebrows. I'm going to hold down Shift and select right eyebrow, my left eye, and right eye, my nose, and my mouth. So now all of these elements are selected, and I'm going to move them all at basically the same rate to begin with. I might make a few adjustments later on, but for now, I'm going to move them all by holding down Shift and pressing an arrow key. And I'm going to press it about 5 times, I think. So I'm going to hold down Shift and press left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so all these elements now are moving to this side at the basic same rate. Now, a lot of times I like to move the nose a little bit more, give it a little bit more dimensionality. That's just the way that I'm doing things, but you can kind of play around with these and see what works best for you. Another immediate step that I'll take is I don't want the eyes kind of still staring straight on. If I'm turning, I probably want the pupils to be looking more towards the side. So I'm going to select both those pupils and move them over so this is kind of their new central location. And yeah, I can fine tune this a little bit later and make, specific eyeballs for each one. But for now, kind of the quick and dirty method, this works well. All right, so what else do we have happening here? Well, I probably want the hair to move over as well. So I'm going to kind of move that over a few, maybe not 5, maybe like 3 or 4 or something like that. Shift and arrow keys just to move it over slightly. And then I want this little tuft of hair, these little tufts of hair in the back. I think I want those to go the opposite direction. Number 1, because I'm kind of running out of room over here, right? But number 2, I want to kind of give this sense of dimensionality. And if you had, these tufts of hair in the back, you kind of, when you're moving your head, those are going to feel like they're going in the opposite direction. And we're going to do the same thing with the ears in a little bit. So I'm actually going to hold down Shift and tap the right arrow for this a few times to get it to move like that. I'm going to take these 2 ones in the front and move these slightly to the left here, something like that. And then the sideburns, I'm going to kind of drag these and make this a little skinnier because I don't want to see as much of it. And then this sideburn, I'm going to drag out a little bit more and adjust it slightly so I'm seeing a little bit more of that as well. Now this ear is going to show up in front now. I don't want it always hiding behind the head. So I'm going to bring this to the front. So let's see which ear this is. This is this ear down here. So I'm just going to drag this group and make sure it's kind of in front of the rest of the hair, and then drag it over so it's kind of moved now, skipped layer order. It's kind of gone in front, and this is again going to give that illusion of flipping around. And then finally, I'm going to take this ear on the other side and just kind of move that to the side. I'm still going to see a little hint of it, but I want to give that sense of it moving to the other side. Okay, so a really quick way to kind of judge how we're doing so far is you just turn the visibility on and off with the frontal view. So let's try that. So something like that. So that's looking pretty good to me. I'm getting that basic sense of turning. I might make a few adjustments based on what I'm seeing here. For example, this feels like it's moving up a little bit more, and I might want it to, rotate and be a little bit more down. That feels like it would turn a little more. This feels like it's a little too close. I might move that up a little bit. So just little adjustments. I just am continually playing with this back and forth to see how it looks and see if it's working the right way. And overall, yeah, this is looking all right to me. This is a pretty good start. All right, cool. So now I'm ready to move on to the next one. So I'm going to hold down Option on left quarter. Or Alt on PC, click and drag that. And now I have a new one. Let's lock left quarter so that's out of the way. And let's call this plus left profile. All right, so now we have left quarter as our starting point instead of frontal, and we're gonna move things over a little bit more there. So let's do the same thing we did before. I'm gonna Shift select all of these different elements and then move them over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. And I'm going to completely get rid of this ear. I don't need that anymore. I'm going to get rid of this sideburn. That's out of the way now. That would be out of the view. I'm going to extend this a little bit more, the sideburn, make that look a little bit better. Drag that up, select this, drag it up a little bit, something like that. Move the ear over, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. Now, at a certain point, you've got to decide if you want your hair to stay all in the same direction or eventually do a flip. In this case, I do think I want it to flip to the other side. So I'm going to do something like this where I'm going to hold down Option or on Mac or Alt on PC while I drag this and change the orientation. And I'm just going to drag this and basically flip it to the other side. Now I'm hoping that I'm going to do this fast enough that that flip will seem smooth. The biggest thing I have to say is you want to keep everything on the same plane, horizontal plane. So if I move this and then I'm moving it, down and up and all of that, it's going to look really jarring. It's going to be very clear to tell where that transition is. So I like to keep everything on the same horizontal plane, at least these big pieces, and then small pieces like this hair that's on the contour in the front and the back. That's okay to move around a little bit, but these big pieces, I think you want to keep it in, definitely for the facial features, keep them on the same horizontal plane. Now we've got that back tuft of hair as well, so I'm going to reverse flip that around and bring it over here. So that's also been part of this flip transition. That's going to appear over here, something like that. And again, I'm going to do the thing with the eyes where I'm going to move the pupils so they're looking more towards the side, something like that. Now, if you were really turning your head, the eyes are not going to keep this exact same shape and size the entire time. They're going to feel like they get a little skinnier, a little narrower, right, as they kind of go around the contours of the face. So a lot of times what I'll do is select those elements. So in this case, the right eye and eyebrow, and I'm just going to take them and skew them slightly like this. Something like that, where they feel like they're kind of losing their shape a little bit. They're kind of getting a little bit narrower, and that's just going to help sell that effect a lot better. I'm going to do the same thing for the mouth down here. I'm holding down Option on Mac or Alt on Windows while I do this, just to make that a little bit skinnier as well. It's a very subtle thing, but it's really going to help sell that effect of the eye is kind of trying to go around the corner, right? Now, what exactly is a quarter view or a profile view is completely up to you. So yeah, this is not a true profile view. If I really wanted to do that, let's just go ahead and get rid of this, the right eye and eyebrow, and let's move the nose all the way to the edge. Let's take the mouth and do something like this. I'd probably add a clipping mask to it or something. I'd bring my left eyes over like this. I'd move the hair so it's completely, on the side here. Maybe this tuft would completely disappear. I could do all this manipulation, but it's really how extreme do you want your head views to be? And, in a lot of cartoons, we're not really seeing a full profile view. A lot of times it's more of a 3/4 view. You want to see more of the character's features to get that additional expressiveness. So this is certainly an option, and you can definitely go this way. I would say for my characters, I usually don't do this. I'm going to do more of the 3/4 view and not make the head turns so extreme. The changes between the frontal and quarter views, for example, now it's a little more subtle. It's not as extreme as, a pull like this, where it goes from, that to there. That's quite a big leap from here to there. And it might look a little chunky and stilted. And that's not what I'm going for. I want things to look a little bit smoother between the different views. So again, completely up to you how you do it. But this is the way that I'm doing it. So basically keep doing this until you have all your different views. And so you would do the exact same thing that I did for the left, for the right. And so by the end of this, you're going to have a bunch of different views. I like to put them in the order of visibility, where it's going from one side to the next. So I start with profile, quarter, front, quarter, profile. And that just lets me really easily move back between my different views to see how they're all looking. And it's just an easier setup, I feel like, if you're setting up triggers or you're setting up your artwork to kind of, guide between the different views. All right, so I import my character into Character Animator. I should be able to see all the different views here. And if I've done them correctly, when you select on them, you should see them tagged down here in this panel correctly. So it's just see profile, right quarter, frontal, left quarter, left profile. You want to make sure all of your things are tagged correctly so the head turner behavior will work. If you do not see these lit up, it's not going to work correctly. So make sure that's set up. And then all I have to do is go up here to my main top level character. I'm going to click the plus button next to behaviors, and I'm just going to go down to the head turner behavior and click on that. And if I've done it correctly, under head turner, each view should have a little 1 next to it of every view that you have. Now you can also make up and down views. I did not do that for this character. I find that's a little straining to move your head up and down, and I don't like it as much as the horizontal views, but you can totally do that, and there's some example puppets out there if you want to see how that's done in real life. But for me, I'm just kind of sticking with these 5 views. I mean, it's totally up to you how many of these views you use. We've seen puppets that only use, a frontal right quarter and right profile view where they only turn in one direction, or they only have frontal and the left quarter and right quarter, or whatever combination of these you want. It's just make sure whatever you're doing over here, it has a 1 next to each tagged element. All right, so this is all set up correctly. Now when I turn my head in the webcam, my character is going to turn his head as well. You can adjust the sensitivity by opening this up and changing the sensitivity. So a lower sensitivity, like 25%, that's not going to trigger the next view until you really move your head to the side, right? So that's going to be a little bit more chunky. You probably don't want to do it that way. On the other, side of things, if I change this to 300%, then it's going to be really fluid and it's almost, too much. Let's do even 600% and move back and forth. Then I'm not even seeing the in-between. There's so little, movement there. So play around with this. It's really going to depend on what you like and what works for you. Typically, I like a value around like 150 or something like that. That's pretty good. That's not going to give me, too many false movements back and forth, but it gives me enough speed that when I change from my different views, it looks nice and fast. I feel like the number one most amateur thing that we see with the head turner behavior is when you have a character like this, and they just kind of really slowly move between the different views. If you look in typical traditional animation, that's not how head turns are done. They're typically done really quickly, right? They move between these different views quickly, and you don't really notice those in-between frames, but they are there to give that sense of a transition from moving to one side to the next. So play around with the values and see what works best for you in terms of what's going to give you that nice, fast head movement and not really that, really chunky frame by frame look. Now, another thing you could do is actually add triggers to these. So I've got this character set up in the example file. You can see this as well, where all of these different views are in a swap set trigger. So if I turn head turner off entirely and I just press buttons instead, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, now I've got triggered control over the head turns. And this could make it a lot easier during the recording process. So let's say I, press record here and I start the countdown. And then I'm going to, do something like this where I press 2, 1, and then I do 2, 3, 4, 5. And then when I go back to the recording, and let's zoom into our timeline by pressing the plus button over here, I can see all of where those transitions are happening. And if I want them to be a lot faster, I can adjust those, however I want. So this might be the easiest way when you're recording is instead of doing the webcam-based triggers, the webcam-based head turner, is to just do it through triggers. And then you've got a lot more control even after recording to decide how quickly those head turns are going to happen and where they're going to happen. All right, so that was the head turner approach. Now let's take a look at the parallax approach. And the first thing you'll notice is I don't have a bunch of views inside my head group anymore. I don't have quarter, profile, front, all of that stuff. It's just the same stuff as would normally be inside a head group. It's just I've made everything a bunch of independent parts. So I've got my spiky hair, my back tuft, my front tufts, this shadow, which I'm gonna add a clipping mask to later. Clipping masks do not, unfortunately, carry over from Illustrator to Character Animator, so I'm gonna do that manually in a later step. That's why he's got this giant transparent shape in front of him right now. But what I basically want to do is be able to move all of these elements separately inside Character Animator and have full control over them. So when they move around, I'm going to be able to control the rate that they're moving and really give that sense of parallax. And that includes the shadow and the ears and the hair and all of that stuff. So basically, the more that you can separate your character into these little parts, independent parts, the better. And I actually simplified the character design for this. So the original character had sideburns on the side, and that felt like that was going to be a little bit tricky when the character turned their head to kind of show and hide those sideburns moving in and out of the side of the head. Now, there's ways to do that. You can play around with clipping masks and some other things to show or hide those. I didn't want to get into that for this tutorial, so I just decided to let it be and simplify the character. But just think about that as you're designing your character if this is the direction that you want to go in. All right, so if I bring this character in by default, I'm not seeing any parallax at all happening, and I'm still seeing this black square on the side of his head as well. So what I'm going to do is start to play around with the parallax behavior parameter inside the face behavior over here. First thing, I'm going to turn head scale strength down to 0. That's set to 25%. I'm going to change that to 0. The reason for that is if you have head scale strength up, you can run into parts that are moving back and forth as you move your head in and out, and that doesn't look really good, particularly when you're trying to make them all move at the same rate. So I'm going for everything that I add a face behavior to, I'm going to make sure that's set to 0 if I'm dealing with parallax. Next down here, I've got parallax strength. This is going to affect the eyebrows, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. By default, this is set to 100. It doesn't do a lot, but if I crank this up to something like, 760, now look what happens when I move my head left and right. All of those elements are moving at the same time with me, and the nose is moving a little bit faster than the eyes and the mouth to kind of give that sense of dimension. So this is just something automatically that you can do with any puppet. But the problem is it's going to feel very floaty and tacked on right now because the hair, the ears, everything, the shadow, nothing else is moving at the same time. And so it's just going to feel like this is all, floating over top of static artwork in the background. So to really sell the effect, we have to have all these different parts moving as well. And okay, the way we're going to do that is kind of a hack. It'd be great if there was actually a parallax behavior to do all of this with, and maybe we'll do that eventually. But for now, this process seems to work pretty well. What I'm going to do is kind of brute force my way into adding head tags and face behaviors to all of these different parts so I have individual control over each of them. So just like, this root level puppet here gets all these behaviors added to it, right? Eye gaze, face, physics, all of that. One of those is the face behavior, and that's looking for the thing that's tagged as head, which in this case is this head group, and that gets tagged as a head here. So what I'm actually going to do is take all of the things that aren't affected by parallax that I want to move. So that includes spike hair, back tuft, front tufts, ear 2. Inside my background, I've got shadow mask here. I'm going to select all of these, and I'm going to do two things to them. Number one, I'm going to tag all of them as extra heads. So all of these, so my character has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus the original 7 heads now. He's a 7-headed monster. And the second thing I'm going to do is with these still all selected, I'm going to go down to behaviors, click the plus, and go to the face behavior to add a face behavior to all of them. And that's going to add this little icon to the side of them. And you can select each of these and adjust where their origin is. That's where they're going to kind of move and rotate from. So typically with the hair, I probably want to do that where it's connected to the body. With the ears, I might move that a little bit closer to the edges here. And with the shadow, I think that's pretty good by itself. While I'm here with the shadow, I might as well just do the clipping mask treatment. So I've got my shadow mask here. I've got this shape of the head underneath it. So all I have to do is select my shadow mask, go to Puppet, create clipping mask, and that is going to just mask that shape to only when it overlays, basically when it goes over top of the shape below it. So now I got rid of that annoying square on the side there, and I just will see the shadow here. And that means I can move it left and right with the face to really sell that parallax effect. All right, so coming back to record mode, I can see that some things are starting to move around. The shadow, the ears, the hair up top, there's a little bit of movement. It's not moving the right way all the time, and some things are curving in weird directions and tilting. So we need to do a little bit of surgery here to get this character working correctly. So you'll notice at the bottom here now, I have all these different face behaviors that have been added, and luckily it says the name of what each one is, so I have a better sense of what I'm working with. So let's start with the spike hair at the top, for example, these 3 tufts of hair that are in the front here. I'm going to do 3 things at the beginning here. I'm going to change head scale strength to 0. I'm going to change head tilt strength to 0. And I'm going to change parallax strength to 0. Basically, the main thing I worry about with parallax when I'm doing this sort of treatment is head position strength. So right now, the hair is moving like that. Now I could kind of exaggerate this by moving that head position strength up, or I could make this smaller by moving that head position strength down. So you can kind of play around with each of these values and see what works best for you. 100 is looking okay to me. There's sometimes where it gets off like that, and so I'd have to kind of play around with that. So maybe a 90 or something like that might be a little bit better. But basically when I'm rigging this stuff, I'm just moving my head left and right, giving my neck a workout here while I'm trying to see what looks okay. And the reason I changed tilt strength down to 0 is because when you add a lot of extra tilt, it's going to add that tilt over top of your head tilt that you're already doing. And you probably only want one thing tilting at a time. You could add a little bit of tilt, I guess, if you want the hair to sway a little bit. But for me, most of the time, I'm going to set that to 0 and just worry about that position strength instead. So let's keep on going with each of these. I'll go with the front tufts here. I'm going to do the same thing, 0, 0, 0 for the scale strength, the tilt strength, and the parallax strength. And let's move to head position strength. Looks like this isn't moving a lot, so I'm going to up this a little bit so it does have a little bit more movement. That I'm talking about these little two triangles in the front here. And that looks a little bit better. Okay, that's looking good. All right, now for the back tuft of hair, let's do the same thing of head scale to 0, tilt to 0, parallax to 0. And for this one, I think I want that tuft to actually move the opposite direction, right? We were talking about this with the head turner where you want to kind of get that sense of dimensionality. So what you can do with head position strength that's pretty cool is you can do negative values. So if I do negative 100, see how that's kind of moving behind the hair? Now there's a little bit, I might have to move some stuff around because I noticed you can kind of see it peeking behind that. And this is just something you have to play around with and position elements just right. So I might actually go back to the Illustrator file or move it in Character Animator so it aligns a little bit better. But that's going to really help sell that sense of dimensionality. If I do negative 200, you'll see it just a little bit better where it's going to be moving like that. So play around with it. These negative values, think about what's going to be moving, what you want moving one way with the face, and what you want moving the other way with the face. Okay, so the shadow had that weird tilt thing going on. That's going to go away when I change head tilt strength to 0, parallax to 0, and that's going to look a little bit better. That shadow is moving a little bit too much. That feels a little bit too extreme to me. So I'm probably going to change that to something like, I don't know, 40. Let's see if that looks a little bit better. Yeah, that looks okay. I'm constantly going back and forth between these different behaviors. So if I change one thing, I'm like, oh, the hair, now that's moving too fast or that's moving too slow. So it is a constant back and forth with how these things work. Now the ears are interesting because the ears, you always kind of want them going the opposite way of your face, right? So if I'm looking this way, this ear is going this way and this ear is going this way, right? They're always going the opposite way that my face is looking. So that means for both of the ears, let's change these values to 0 again. And what I'm going to do is set both of them to negative values. So let's do that. And then let's change the ear head position strength to something like negative 300. Let's see how that looks. And negative 300 up here for this ear. So now as I move around, the ears are moving in the opposite direction. Now that looks a little bit too extended. That's a little too much. So let's try something like negative 150 for both of these. You're going to want them to both be the same value. That looks a little bit better. If I go too extreme, they're going to kind of go off the edge there. But overall, that's looking all right. So yeah, after playing around with things a little bit, you get a pretty nice effect moving around. Now, Character Animator having to simultaneously run all these face behaviors at the same time, these 7 or 8 face behaviors, that can run into some issues where you might run into performance problems. So like if you're going to do this for every individual strand of hair and you have someone with long hair and there's like 20 face behaviors, it's going to run really, really slow, right? So unless you have a beast of a machine, you might want to consider scaling things back. So that's why I have, these 3 hair things instead of in the front, instead the spiky hair, instead of them being 3 individual face behaviors and tagged as heads, I just have them as one piece. And so it's just something to help optimize. If you see your character running a little bit slow, depending on the age of your machine, you may want to kind of optimize it and group things together if they're moving at the exact same rate. Now, yeah, you can run into situations where when you go too far outside the range of parallax, you're going to get, things floating off the side and, weird things like that. That's okay. As long as this basic, movement here is all right, I think you're all right. And you can always scale things back by your main face behavior. If you turn down head position strength or head tilt strength, that's going to limit how much your head can tilt and move back and forth. And, so you can play around with that if you don't want these floating elements off. Personally, I'm okay with it. I know kind of my range, and if I'm recording some or doing some live, I know I'm not going to go too far in an extreme. And even if I do, it's kind of funny when it happens anyway, so it's okay. All right, so which of these should you use for your own characters? Really, it's up to you, and it's really a stylistic choice. Some people like the kind of frame-by-frame nature of the head turner on the left here more than the smoother feeling of Parallax, whereas Parallax, some people prefer that as well. So it's really dependent on you and how much you're willing to dig into it, right? So, I think head turner is probably the more inclusive one for more character designs because it's just easier to, you're drawing each view and you have full control over what each view looks like. And when you get into things like the triggers, like I showed and stuff like that, you've got a lot of control over how fast or how slow that's happening. That being said, Parallax is really nice, just adds, that nice three-dimensional feel to a character and feels a lot smoother. And a lot of people who do the head turner say, hey, how can I make this look smoother? And then they see Parallax and they say, oh, wait, I wish I had done that. So don't just take my word for it, though. And just these two examples, there are a ton of head turner and Parallax examples out there. I wrote a list of them in the video description below with links on how to check them all out. So you can see how other artists and some of our other example puppets have used these techniques to bring some of their characters to life. And hopefully that will help you make your decision. So hopefully that was a good quick look into the world of head turning and Parallax. We would love to see you use these techniques, so please use #CharacterAnimator when sharing on social media so myself and the rest of the team can check out all of your great work. And if you have any questions, if anything here didn't make sense or you're running into problems or the views aren't triggering or the mouth isn't working in the left profile view or your Parallax eye is moving into another dimension or whatever, the best place to get help is the official Character Animator forums. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching and have fun.